talk about your boys' season this year. You know, they came out and they beat a lot of teams that they were picked to lose to. They used adversity on their side throughout the whole season and came up just short against Benicia last week. Maybe put the season in contrast for everyone.
Yeah, I think I think the game itself on Friday kind of just signified and typified what our season was about. The emotional roller coaster. The ups and downs. Falling behind early kind of signified our first half of the season. Coming back, probably our second half of the season, and then just coming up short was finishing one game over 500. So going into the year, I don't think anybody would have anticipated that. But I think going into the year, and for myself, honestly, never anticipated playing three teams that are 10-1 at this point, and playing another team, another team that has 9 wins, another team that's got 8 wins. So I didn't think our schedule was going to be as tough as it was, and it ended up being that way. But I tell you what, for a team that finishes 6-5, this is probably the best team that could have happened to, because of the fact that they'd never really imploded on themselves. The guys fought hard all the way through. There were times when we were down pretty low in terms of the season, and then we came storming back, up top, and finished off the regular season with a big win here at home against Hillmar. Kind of gave us some momentum going into Benicia, an 11, going 85 miles away to a number 6, and just the way the whole game went, kind of just, like I said, kind of typified the season a little bit. It was ups and downs. There was a lot of ups and downs.
One of the things, every year that you do in the final game of the season is you kind of say your goodbyes a little bit to the senior players who have given you, all they've had for, at least 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Many of them. Talk about that process of saying goodbye to seniors every year and kind of turning the page to a new team at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's so much different as a coach than it is as a player. I mean, as a player, you come in, you've got your 4 years of high school ball, and then that's it. And then sometimes you move on to JC, sometimes you move on to 4 years, sometimes, and most of the time that's it. That's all you're doing. You maybe get an all-star game in the summer. As a coach, you keep going, and that's the unfortunate part for them, because their road ends and ours just takes another turn to another team next year and that type of thing. And so you obviously you want to make sure that at the end of the year those guys are honored in some way, and everything that we've done throughout this season was based upon our senior leadership and that type of thing. Guys were able to step up when we needed them to, on and off the field. I mean, it was all the way around, and you can't be more prouder than what we were of our seniors this year, and especially the way that they played in their final game. I mean, it was an all-out fight, and they gave everything they had the whole time. So we're extremely proud of that. But it is tough, it's also, it's hard. You see, it's Friday. You talk about it after the game, and it's the end of the road, and then you're with them on the bus ride home. Then you see him at the locker room. Then you see him in school. So it's not like the end of the world and you never see him again. They're around. Obviously, it's a different way now because we don't have them, 3:30 on the practice field, or in the stadium, for practice now. It's kind of that disappearance. But the beauty for me is I see him in school still. I get to go to their sporting events, and they compete in other sports and that type of thing. And then the biggest goodbye is when they go off to graduation and they have their ceremony in May. So that's when it really kicks in. And I always like being around these guys, and it goes for sophomores, juniors, all these guys throughout the year after the season's over. It always seems like now there's nothing to strive for or anything like that, as we go through as the season ends. But life goes on, and we're just gonna have to be there to support them in their other endeavors.
You do have a few returning cogs coming back next year. You also have some players, I'd imagine, stepping up from this past co-WAC champion JV team as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe talk a little about I know it's obviously super early, but talk a little about what's to be optimistic about next season as far as Patterson football.
Yeah, there's a lot of positives coming back, and I know it's always hard for, especially this close to. I mean, we're not even a week into the ending of our season, and it's hard for sometimes it's hard, actually not sometimes, but most of the time it's hard for the seniors to hear the part about what's going to happen for next year, and if things are looking good or things are looking bleak and that kind of thing. And in a way, I think subconsciously they're probably rooting for it to look bad, so that at least they have the promise of their season and that type of thing. And but I think everything's going to point to a pretty strong season for us. Our schedule will be tough once again. I don't know if it'll be as tough as what we saw this year, but it will be tough. We have major components coming back. Anytime you return your quarterback and your offensive line, you're going to be in decent shape. And so we've got that coming back with us. I think we only lose one guy on the offensive line. We have, obviously with Cody coming back, and you have a receiver Nick Ward coming back, and then you have a very capable running back in Ephraim Jones coming back. Offensively, there's weapons there, and you get all the guys coming up from JV, to get in the mix. That looks really good. And then defensively, our secondary is going to be intact for the most part. Our linebacker crew and our defensive line, everybody loses. Each one of those groups loses a guy or a couple guys, and so I think it's like 6 on each side of the ball that we return that are starters. And so that will obviously play more of a factor for us, because going into this year we were really low in terms of starting, guys getting starting experience, and so that's going to help us a lot. And the guys coming from the JV will obviously help us a lot. And so the off season will be very important for us to make sure everybody's on the same page. Try to build some consistency with everything, and so we're not going to keep learning new things over and over and over. I think that the best thing for us to do right now is to be as consistent as possible and focus on what we do well, and just narrow in on those things. And we'll get started with that as we come back from Christmas break.
Final question of the season. I imagine with every year you have your favorite memories from each team. Maybe talk briefly about one of your favorite memories from this year's team, or maybe just a favorite game experience. Well,
I think it's hard with so many. You narrow it down to one thing and one instant, that type of thing. But game experience to me, it's still fresh in our minds, was our Hillmar game. By far one of our most intense games that we played. It is just one of the funnest games that we've been in a long time, and that was kind of the consensus from talking to different people, whether it be players or coaches. It just seemed like everything was clicking. The kids came out hitting hard. The intensity was there, and for me personally, that was probably one of my most memorable games, as being as intense as it was on the sideline and that type of thing, and just being up for it the entire time. And a good way to kind of put a little pause on the rivalry between Patterson and Hillmar. I mean, you never know. It may come back in 3 years, or it could be gone for a while. It just depends. It depends on where we go, what path everybody chooses from here on out. So to be able to do that the last game of the year and bounce back the way we did against the loss to Central, I think that just stood out in my mind. We've always put on some good games. Now with our overtime loss on Friday, we've been now in an overtime loss. We were in an overtime win last year. We're in an overtime loss. We've been in goal line stands. We've been in for a win, goal line stands for a loss. Blowout wins, blowout losses. I mean, we've seen them all now, and so we've had field goals to win. We've had field goals to lose. And it's just, there's so many different games. I mean, 7 years of games so far that I couldn't really pick it down to one moment. But this last one with Hillmar was probably one that stood out, especially for this year anyways.